I hope everyone's having a good day and a good breakfast. My name's Tim Herms. I'm the founder and group publisher of Broadband Technology Report and Lightwave. I appreciate seeing such a big room today. I really appreciate the pink shirts. They're killing me out there. Welcome to this morning's breakfast on DOCSIS 3.1 Revisited. We were here last year, and there's been movement as far as this technology. And I wanted to, first of all, obviously thank our panelists and also thank our sponsors, Trilithic VX, Viavi Solution, and then Solutions, and then, of course, to Eris for providing the live stream service. If you have colleagues that had too much on Bourbon Street last night and wanted to make it, you can just have them jump onto the live stream, which is at btreport.net, and they can see the whole breakfast, and then it will also be on the homepage for quite a while. So they won't be missing it. BTR has had some exciting changes in the past year. We've hired some new people, and I just wanted to recognize them, first of all. Most importantly is Stephen Hardy, who is our new editor-in-chief. Stephen came to us from our sister publication, Lightwave, and Stephen and I met in February and decided to make some fairly, I don't want to say drastic, but substantial changes to BTR's format, going into more deep dive stuff on the industry and really digging into the technology that is influencing the industry, as well as touching on some of the business aspects and, of course, covering new products. Stephen has been fabulous so far, so I'm really happy that we were able to grab him. Also, we do have a new media sales rep whose name is Whitney Seven. She's behind us, and there she is. Asked her to wave. And then last but not least, I'm retiring. Actually, tomorrow is basically effectively my last day. So I'm a little bit choked up right now. So I will still be in the industry as a consultant, so I guess you'd call it semi-retiring. But most importantly, I'm really excited because our new publisher, many of you already know, who is Rob Stewart. He's a personal friend. He's a great executive. He came from CED magazine. I battled with him for years when I was at Communications Technology. I usually lost. But then I actually hired Rob for BTR. He did a great job for me for several years. And then when I sold BTR to PennWell Corporation in 2011, I ended up working for Rob. So we've had a great relationship. And he also witnessed probably my worst snowboarding accident I've ever had. And rather than helping me up, he left. So, Rob, could you stand up real quick? If you can give him a round of applause. I've enjoyed meeting many of you. Some of you I haven't. Again, I'll still be involved in the industry quite a bit. But this has been 11 years of a lot of fun, and this is kind of I hate to say it, a swan song, but it was great. So with that, I'd like to thank our panelists again, and I'd like to introduce our new editor, who is a superstar, Stephen Hardy.
Thank you very much, Tim. I am Stephen Hardy, Editorial Director of Broadband Technology Report and Lightwave. While we were applauding, just one more round of applause for Tim on his retirement. Tim has been very good to work for, and I'm certainly going to miss him, but looking forward to working with Rob as well. So this morning, as the title of our breakfast panel suggests, we are going to take another look at DOCSIS 3.1. I say another look because last year at this time, we had a breakfast focusing on recent developments in the technology. So what we're going to look at today is what has changed in the past year and what we can look forward to in the near future in terms of DOCSIS technology development, requirements, deployments, and use cases. So as you can see, we have a very distinguished panel of experts here. To my immediate left is Bilal Hamzeh, who's Director of Network Technologies at CableLabs, Bilal currently is leading the wireless and wired technologies R&D efforts for Wi-Fi, LTE technologies, 5G, and DOCSIS. He has extensive experience in the technology development life cycle for wired and wireless technologies, spanning specification and standards development to technology development. Next to him, we have Steve Harris, who's a Senior Director, Advanced Network Technologies, Education and Engineering at our host, SCTE. Steve is an experienced telecommunication professional who's driving the SCTE technical training roadmap for cable operators around the globe. He develops technical curriculum, industry-wide certifications, boot camps, operational practices, symposiums, webinars, and other technical resources for the industry. And he's participated in many industry partnerships and working groups, such as the deployment of IPv6, CableLabs SCTE DOCSIS Engineering Professional Certification, DOCSIS 3.1 Essentials, and a Wi-Fi career path. Also proactive network maintenance, which will be a topic we'll be discussing today, as well as optical access networks. Next to him is Ron Hranac, Technical Leader, Cable Access Business Unit of CIsco Systems. Ron represents CIsco on a variety of industry standards and specifications development subcommittees and working groups. He provides high-level engineering support to CIsco's customers. He also offers internal account team support, works with new business development, marketing, and product development teams, evaluating product requirements and high-level architectures for new cable-related technology. He is also attempting to set the record for most ribbons attached to his name tag.
What do you mean, set the record?
Yes, he'll be signing autographs after this is over. Next to him is George Salinger, Vice President of Access Architecture at Comcast. Among other accomplishments, George has played a key role in the development and adoption of the Converged Cable Access Platform, or CCAP. Recently, he has headed the MSO's experiments with DOCSIS 3.1 and live field trials in the home of Comcast employees and other quote-unquote friendlies. Next to him is Brady Volpe, founder of the Volpe firm and NimbleVis LLC. Brady has nearly 25 years of broadband cable and technology industry experience. After graduating from Penn State University with a degree in electrical engineering, he started as an RF engineer at C-Core Electronics, which of course is now part of ARIS. Moving into the DOCSIS arena while working at Filtronic SIGTech, he graduated with a master's in electrical engineering from Johns Hopkins Applied Research Lab. At SIGTech, he co-invented the first portable DOCSIS protocol analyzer for the broadband cable market, a lady who worked at Sunrise Telecom and JDSU. Currently at the Volpe firm, he specializes in DOCSIS, PNM, EPON, SIP trunking, troubleshooting, voice over IP, video, MATLAB simulations for product development, technology roadmaps, and all things broadband. He also founded NimbleVis in 2013, which is the first company to bring proactive network maintenance, or PNM, to the commercial market. So the format today, basically, I'm going to start asking a few questions because that's what I do for a living. We'll get a general discussion going for a while, and then later on, I will open the floor to questions. If you have one, when we get to that point, if you could please come up to the microphone so that A, everybody can hear you, and B, your question can be recorded for the live stream. For those of you who are participating via live stream, we'll also have the capability to field some of your questions, so feel free to type them in the console. So let's get started. I have to admit, I was somewhat tempted to assume that if you were here, you had at least a vague idea of what DOCSIS 3.1 was. However, since I was raised to resist temptation, maybe the best thing to do is do a basic level set. So maybe, Bilal, I'll start with you. If you could just give us maybe a basic outline of what are the major differences between DOCSIS 3.1 and DOCSIS 3.0.
So for DOCSIS 3.1, one of the major things that we achieve there is the spectral efficiency that we can achieve on today's network. So if you, for example, take it from compared to DOCSIS 3.0, you get on average a 50% increase in spectral efficiency. Mm-hmm. And that's using techniques like using the OFDM, the advanced error correction codes, that really helps boost the performance of DOCSIS on today's networks.
Mm-hmm. Steve, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, improved multiplexing through OFDM is going to allow DOCSIS 3.1 to scale through beyond gigabit services. I think is a major benefit that's been added to DOCSIS 3.1.
Ron, what do you see as the major difference?
I think there are a lot of improvements in the physical layer arena. We're used to what's called single carrier QAM with DOCSIS 3.0 and earlier versions, but DOCSIS 3.1 brings to the table some physical layer changes that include OFDM or orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, and as Bilal mentioned, improved error correction. Well, that's known as LDPC or low density parity check, which brings some added robustness, which allows cable operators to take advantage of DOCSIS 3.1's higher modulation orders. I want you to imagine looking at a constellation display in the future of a 16,384 QAM signal. That is supported as an optional constellation in the downstream. So that and expanded frequency range in our networks are some big changes compared to earlier versions.
Okay. George, what do you see as the main difference?
In addition to everything that we've already said, I think one of the biggest benefits or additions in DOCSIS 3.1 is the concept of a modulation profile and then multiple modulation profiles. We don't have to, do these big blocks of spectrum that we're going to have. We don't have to configure the entire spectrum in the same way as we do with single carrier QAM channels, DOCSIS 2.0, 3.0 downstreams. We can configure the spectrum in the best possible way for the plant that we're serving, and then in addition to that, we can have a modulation profile or different modulation profiles in the same downstream for groups of modems, and then be able to do that proactively and manage it, proactively, actively during the day as conditions of the plant change. So I think that's a great addition. We're going to get more capacity out of the plant through the use of modulation profiles and being able to change them over time.
Brady, what do you see as the main difference?
So built-in testing. We saw there was a workshop yesterday. 90% of the cable operators in a room were currently using PNM. In DOCSIS 3.1, PNM is part of the DOCSIS standard, which is nothing that we've had in the past. So standardizing proactive network maintenance is going to make it much more easier and also much more effective in our tools to help us deploy DOCSIS 3.1, monitor DOCSIS 3.1, and improve the quality of experience for our subscribers.
Very good. Now let's see, before I ask the next question, I've been asked by our technical people for all of you to move your microphones a little bit closer to yourselves and also to speak up a little bit. Great. So are we pretty much done with the standards, at least as far as having enough specifications in place to create DOCSIS 3.1 technology? Maybe Ron, I'll have you.
I'd say yes. Certainly there are ongoing tweaks and changes through ECRs at CableLabs, but the physical layer specification version number 7 was just released by CableLabs, below a month, maybe 2 months ago. It was the development of the 3.1 specs, of course, were fast-tracked compared to, say, DOCSIS 3.0. And it's out on the street. The first version was released in October of 2013. So, yeah, it's pretty much finalized with just some ongoing minor revisions here and there.
Mm-hmm. Bilal, what was in that last release that was different from the previous?
Nothing major, just as Ron said, we're just tweaking small modifications. As vendors are maturing their products, we just identify a few things that either need to be clarified or modified. So nothing that can fundamentally affect the product development lifecycle.
Okay. So Ron, you mentioned OFDM. Could you talk a little bit about the orthogonal frequency division multiplexing and why it's important within the DOCSIS context?
OFDM is a new physical layer technology for cable operators. It's not a new technology per se, because OFDM has been used in a lot of other arenas like MoCA and DVB and Wi-Fi and so on over the years. But it's new for cable, and it lets us, as a cable industry, leverage the expertise that's been developed in OFDM in other arenas. So that's a good piece. But what the heck is OFDM? Well, today's technology for transmitting data in cable networks uses something called single carrier QAM, or single carrier quadrature amplitude modulation. And what that means is one signal, one QAM signal occupies one channel. In the case of OFDM, a whole bunch of OFDM signals called subcarriers occupy one channel. And that also frees up the cable industry from 6 megahertz or 8 megahertz bandwidth channels. And indeed, DOCSIS 3.1 supports a downstream channel bandwidth as wide as 192 megahertz. And within that 192 megahertz, there can be in the range of 4,000 to almost 8,000 subcarriers in that channel, spaced either 25 kilohertz or 50 kilohertz apart. And the orthogonal piece of that, because the FDM we've been doing for decades, that means each signal gets its own channel slot. But when you add the word orthogonal to it, that means that these little miniature QAM signals actually overlap with each other, and they don't interfere with each other because they're orthogonal. And when you think of orthogonal as cable operators, we tend to think of the feeds on a microwave dish or a satellite dish because they're 90 degrees apart, so they're orthogonal. Well, don't think of that as being orthogonal here. Think of orthogonal as describing a relationship such that these subcarriers don't interfere because of some very, very precise frequency and phase and other relationships. And I could spend an hour talking about that, but I won't because I think the folks in the audience would prefer to stay awake this morning.
As would I. So with all that said, where do we stand on technology development? George, maybe I'll start with you because I imagine if people have been developing technology, they've been showing it to you.
Yeah, we're testing in our labs. We're actively testing in our labs. In fact, in 3 different ways, all of the equipment that is available. We're focused, as I've said in a number of occasions, including on last presentation, that we are working on beginning deployments this year. We're actively working on testing the versions of code and the CMTSs and the cable modems that we're going to use for testing. And our objective initially this year is for network readiness. There's quite a bit of things that we need to do in order to be ready to deploy. And so because of that, we've been testing the equipment, and I can tell you very confidently that the equipment development has been moving very rapidly. It's very advanced. We've had many tens of versions of software already, both for the CMTSs and the cable modems, and things are getting ready for deployment. Now, as we're deploying them, we're finding some bugs in some things, unexpected results in others, and so over the course of many years, there'll be improvements to the implementation. And then, like anything else, there's a lot of functionality in the specifications, and not everything is available initially. So there's basic functionality that is implemented that gives us the benefits of DOCSIS 3.1 in a big way. Like, for example, being able to deploy gigabit per second service and beyond, that is available right now. We are actively being capable of serving with 40 downstream channels as we are planning on deploying gigabit per second service. So I think the equipment availability is very clear. And as you walk through the show floor, you'll see it in every booth. Every vendor has them in their booths.
So you were talking about the fact that a few things have cropped up as you've been examining the technology. Have those things been more vendor specific, or have there been issues that have cropped up regardless of whose technology you're looking at?
More implementation specific things. It's like anything, right? You're developing some new technology and you find things that you didn't expect, or behavior that is not necessarily compatible. DOCSIS is about interoperability, right? It's an interoperability specification between the cable modem and the CMTS, and so the implementation of both things need to interoperate. And like anything, there's misinterpretations of the specification on one side or the other. So it's a natural evolution of the specification, and it's the reason why interrupts are carried out at CableLabs, which has carried out 6 of them already, and Bill, I can talk more about those.
Yeah, well, why don't you?
So over the last year, we've completed 6 rounds of interrupts, and last September, we just had what I call a demo day. So we had 22 vendors in our labs demonstrating their technologies, whether CM, CMTS, or test equipment. And even at this early stage of development, we've seen CMTSs working with multiple CMs, delivering multi-gig. We've seen solutions ranging between 3 gigs to 4.5 gigs, and that's still early in the development cycle. So it's developing quite rapidly, and it's very promising.
And I want to expand just a little bit on what George said. One of the things that DOCSIS 3.1 brings to the table is a lot of configurability. I like to describe it as saying that DOCSIS 3.1 has a lot of knobs to tweak things. And it's very, very easy to mistweak some of those configurations and get some perhaps results that one didn't expect. So the cable industry will be learning a lot about how to configure the operation of DOCSIS 3.1 optimally. And I suspect there will be a few stubbed toes along the way as some of those knobs get turned the wrong way.
Yeah. Let me add one other thing. I don't want the message to be, there's problems with DOCSIS 3.1. That's not the case.
No, there's not.
The
Right.
the development of DOCSIS 3.1 is faster than any of us have ever seen. It's really unbelievably fast. We've never had in the past a specification, 2.0, 1.1 before that, and 3.0 developed so quickly. Within a period of less than a year, or almost exactly a year, we've had 6 interrupts, and that is, even before the specs were completed, and that's never happened before. The speed with which DOCSIS 3.1 is being developed is just incredible, and so what I think what we're seeing is a super fast development that is, uncovering issues like we've always done before over much longer periods of time happening very, very quickly, so that we can begin deploying, DOCSIS 3.1 and gigabit per second services. And we want to do that as quickly as we can, as extensively as we can, and that is what's happening. If you walk through the show floor, you'll see DOCSIS 3.1 in every CMTS and every cable modem vendor that is in the show floor. And then if you look, you'll see a cable modem with our name on it, because we've developed a cable modem for that. And we're ready to begin putting it in the field, and that's what we're going to do in the next couple of months.
And one other thing to take a look at is the test equipment. I think you'll find that
Yes.
most of the test equipment vendors have got some flavor of DOCSIS 3.1 support available now or about to come out the door.
That's right.
And one last thing on DOCSIS 3.1 that I think is really important for folks to understand, because I hear cable operators say, DOCSIS 3.1 is not something that I need. I wouldn't need to buy that CMTS, but the backwards compatibility of DOCSIS 3.1 to DOCSIS 3.0 and even 2.0 modems is amazing. And so if you're looking to invest and put in your budget sometime for a new CMTS, buying a DOCSIS 3.1 CMTS really future-proofs you, because you have the backwards capability both in the downstream and the upstream to interoperate with your modem. So you could have at some point DOCSIS 3.1 modems operating both in the downstream and the upstream, DOCSIS 3.0 modems channel bonded in the downstream and the upstream, with DOCSIS 3.1 modems operating in OFDM, OFDMA mode. And this is really something that was looked at carefully, just as we've always done with all versions of DOCSIS, include that backwards compatibility. So it's something that future-proofs you when you're looking at buying a new CMTS in the future.
Yeah, I was just going to add that flexibility piece with DOCSIS 3.1, where we can stage the field with DOCSIS modems and then turn them up when we need to for DOCSIS 3.1, and then have an ability for the diplexer where we can actually turn on 85 megahertz in the upstream when we're ready. Just having that flexibility that Ron mentioned on OFDM, we don't have to initially deploy 192 megahertz channels. We can start with 24 megahertz and work our way up. So that flexibility piece is huge for DOCSIS 3.1.
Mm-hmm. Great. So another new aspect that, Brady, you brought up earlier was the PNM. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you're seeing as far as, we were talking about technology development, the vendors kind of embracing that and employing that?
Yeah, so everything we've done so far with PNM pre-DOCSIS 3.1 has added us a lot of nice test capabilities. As we developed the DOCSIS 3.1 specification, we said, well, as a baseline, we want everything that we have today, plus we want a bunch of new features added into the spec. So we added in everything we have now. We added in the new features to the spec. When you buy a modem, a DOCSIS 3.1 modem today, it's going to have things like the full band capture. So you're not going. Those things are going to fundamentally be there. Now, all the new advanced features that we've put in, like the vector signal analyzer capabilities, the network analysis capabilities, those features are not quite in the equipment right now because really, we're talking about things of just getting fundamental operabilities of DOCSIS 3.1 in the downstream and the upstream. We're waiting for these new features to be developed, so they're kind of like secondary. So they're not quite in there yet. We're going to be waiting for the vendors to put them in. Things that are already there is right now we have like pre-equalization capabilities in the upstream, which we've seen today. We have that now, but we also have pre-equalization capabilities in the downstream. And oh, by the way, since our channel width is only 25 or 50 kilohertz wide, our accuracy to identify an impairment in the downstream or the upstream is about 40 times more accurate than it is with a DOCSIS 2.0 or a DOCSIS 3.0 cable modem. And we can also look at it in the downstream, whereas before we could only look at that impairment in the upstream using the cable modem's pre-equalizer. So we have some immediate opportunities to use PNM, but we're still waiting on vendors to put the DOCSIS 3.1 new features from a PNM standpoint into basically the software, firmware loads that will go into both the CMTS and also the cable modems. That's still under development.
Brady, are you hearing anything about time frame for that incorporation?
I don't have any time frame on that.
No.
The vendors would have that information.
Well, we have a vendor on our panel. Ron?
It's coming.
That's all we ever hear. No, I mean, one thing that is clear with DOCSIS 3.1, which has happened before, that as the years progress, especially the first few years, you get more and more functionality, and that's one thing that is great with this technology, with DOCSIS 3.1. There's so much additional functionality that will get added over the years, so things will get better and better. But to a point that we made at the beginning, just to reiterate. If you're thinking about, as an operator, if you're thinking about DOCSIS 3.1 is I don't have the spectrum to deploy DOCSIS 3.1, so I'll wait. You can start buying cable modems, and gateways that have DOCSIS 3.1, immediately, as you want to do that, and they will operate just like a DOCSIS 3.0 modem will. In fact, they'll operate like the best DOCSIS 3.0 cable modem that you can buy. Right off the bat, a 3.1 cable modem from the very first day will support 32 downstream channels, and DOCSIS 3.0 downstream channels, single carrier QAM channels, and 8 upstreams. They can't buy a better DOCSIS 3.0 cable modem than that. In addition to that, it'll support 2 OFDM blocks in the downstream. So it's a total of 96 channels in a 750 system. That's 75% of the spectrum. It's amazing, right? The amount of capacity that it will support. So there's so much forward, backward compatibility and forward, capacity into the network that you buy by buying these by deploying these cable modems. And then on the CMTS side, in the case of at least one vendor, DOCSIS 3.1 is incorporated in the next revision of software that will become available from them. So even if you didn't necessarily want to deploy the functionality, it'll be available in the version of code that you'll get from that one vendor. But every vendor is doing the same thing. So, by the end of next year, every vendor CMTS equipment will incorporate DOCSIS 3.1, whether you deploy it or not. So, it's an amazing amount of progress so quickly. It's great for us as cable operators.
I want to expand just a bit on what George said about deployability. One of the concerns that some cable operators will express from time to time is, well, I don't have a 192 megahertz wide chunk of spectrum available today. I've got some channels here and some channels there, and I've got some spectrum in between them. How do I use that? Well, the neat thing about DOCSIS 3.1 and the OFDM is that you don't need a contiguous 192 megahertz chunk. You could certainly use a smaller channel bandwidth in the downstream, but you can also do something, and this gets back to the knobs in DOCSIS 3.1 for tweaking the configuration. You can create what are called exclusion bands, where subcarriers are nulled, or think of it as being turned off on certain frequencies. So maybe you've got a group of conventional channels or single carrier QAM channels that you can't move for whatever reason. So you create an exclusion band around those channels, and then the rest of the available spectrum is OFDM, and yet it's all part of that one channel, and the two live together and can coexist nicely. And that's one of the neat features in DOCSIS 3.1 is that ability to tweak the configuration to support something like that.
Yeah, I was just going to add, it's very similar to all our other roadmaps with technology. The incremental approach is similar to V6, that V6 took us a while to get there, but DOCSIS is going to get there very quickly. But over time, you saw the V6 story get stronger and stronger. And when we ran out of IP addresses, we were ready. The same thing with DOCSIS. We can add those features each year. So we could start off with this offering a downstream, and then we can add the upstream. And then we can add speed over time to get ready over the years, for competition or for customer demand, and then we're there ready to go.
So it kind of sounds like, gee, we're ready to go. On the other hand, George, you're going through the field trials, potentially finding some issues. What are you seeing as perhaps the major hurdles, if there are major hurdles, or what are the primary hurdles to deployment that you see that still need to be overcome?
I wouldn't call them hurdles, but there's certainly things that need to be done in order to deploy. I mean, one of the big things, of course, is having the spectrum available. I mean, all of us cable operators don't have a whole lot of empty space and empty spectrum in our networks. We use the spectrum actively for everything that we provide. And so it's a matter of finding ways to free up spectrum. And so over the years at Comcast, for example, we've been removing analog channels. We don't have analog channels anymore. We've had a very extensive, long program to do that. But in doing that, we got 80 channels back. And so we've done that, and that was the basis for deploying a lot of HD channels. More recently, now we're working on migrating from MPEG-2 to MPEG-4 on HD channels to make more spectrum available. In a nutshell, this involves removing set-top boxes from the network that don't support MPEG-4, which is very few nowadays, but we still have a few. And then once those are removed in the network, then we can switch over all HD from MPEG-2 to MPEG-4, and that gives us back half of the channels that, roughly speaking, half of the channels that we use for HD today, which is a lot of channels. And so, there's different things that some people have deployed SDV, and with SDV you can migrate long tail content from being broadcasted to being multicasted whenever it's required. And any of these techniques will allow for freeing up spectrum in order to deploy DOCSIS 3.1 signals. And so that's one of the big long tail things, right? So it's one thing that needs to be done. Availability of tools that support installation is the other one. We've been working with all the tool developers, all the companies that develop tools to have these tools available as quickly as possible. So as we go to trials, we'll have these tools in the next couple of months. In fact, we have some of them already in our labs. And then there's tools for capacity management. Capacity is not going to mean the same thing moving forward with DOCSIS 3.1 spectrum. Then there is network monitoring and on, right? There's a lot of tools that we use that are optimized, that were initially optimized for a single DOCSIS channel, that eventually were expanded to support multiple DOCSIS channels, and that now will need to be expanded to support OFDM channels as well. So it's a lot of adapting, preparation, in some cases required things like spectrum and tools, but it's natural evolution that we've seen with any version of DOCSIS or any other new technology that we've incorporated.
Steve, what do you see?
Yeah, I believe in planning. I mean, we all do it, right? Planning is very important. And if you look at even the home network, we really have to start planning the home network to support 85 megahertz in the upstream. And planning starts now. So years down the road, we can plan for 85 or 204 megahertz in the upstream. And also, it's not really a challenge, but just planning to run DOCSIS 3.1 along with MoCA in the home. So if you're doing that, it's just getting those things out there on the table, getting the plan ready, getting everything staged so you're prepared.
Yeah, and training, by the way, training. We're working very closely with SCTE on training. Training is a big thing. It's not the case of moving a box out, putting another box in, and I'm done. All of a sudden, hooray, I have DOCSIS 3.1. It's a lot of training that has to go in place. DOCSIS 3.1 in the downstream, as Ron said before, the PHY is completely different. There's hardly any similarities between 3.0 and 3.1. It's completely different at the PHY layer, and so training is a very big thing.
Steve?
Yeah, I was going to say, we believe in the training. We've been running parallel with CableLabs, working with CableLabs very closely, working with Comcast and Liberty Global very closely. We've had the DOCSIS 3.1 training out for over a year now. It's so important to understand all the differences, and like George was sharing, it's not just going from 2.0 to 3.0. There's a lot of different differences. You do not have to turn everything on at once, and there's things that you can do initially and then things that you can do later on. But we have that training available. It's very, very important to get up to speed.
I guess, Bilal, Steve said that he's been working with you. How do you see the training process proceeding?
Well, the good thing is MSOs are starting early. I think the training part will be a very critical part of the whole deployment process. At the rate we've seen the development, and we expect the deployment to be just as fast, to have our workforce ready in time is very important. So, and again, we're collaborating with SCTE and with folks like ARIS to make sure that the material is ready, the consultation is ready if we need to clarify anything, and we think that is a very critical element of the whole process.
Mm-hmm. So I suppose another critical part of the process is getting certified equipment. What can you tell us about the certification process and where we are right now?
So we're, CableLabs, we had the blog, CableLabs has opened for certification, and vendors are free to submit for their devices for certification.
And have you seen any products offered for certification yet?
That's for us to know and you to find out.
Well, that's why I'm asking. Once again, we have a test equipment vendor on the panel, Ron.
Well, I'm not a test equipment vendor.
Not
per
test,
se,
excuse
but-
me, a equipment vendor.
But as far as the certification and qualification process, I'm not at liberty to discuss the status of that part. Yeah, I think it was Bilal who mentioned earlier the demos that happened at CableLabs here a while back, and the media was invited to that and got to see some pretty impressive operation from a variety of vendors, the silicon vendors, the modem vendors, and the CMTS vendors. And we were all demonstrating pieces and parts of DOCSIS 3.1 technology. And in fact, we're urged to do so to show that, look, this stuff is real and it really works. But as far as the certification and qualification process, the details of that are not for public consumption.
All right.
Let me add one thing. So as an operator, working on DOCSIS 3.1, very actively operator, and as a member of DOCSIS Certification Board, what I can tell you is that there is a lot of interest, a lot of activity towards getting ready for certification. CableLabs has done an incredible job of getting ready for certification in record time, and CableLabs is ready to receive equipment for certification. We know that there are vendors working on submissions for certification. There's a whole lot of effort going on for getting ready for certification. I think that we'll see equipment certified quicker than ever before.
So based on what you're seeing in terms of preparation, did you care to make a prognostication of when we'll start seeing fully certified products? When we'll see products that have gone
very,
through?
very, very soon.
As in weeks, months?
Very, very soon.
All right.
Is there more ways in which you can ask this question?
I'm racking my brain, believe me. All right, maybe I'll come back to that later.
Very, very soon.
Very soon, very, very soon. All right. So one of the things that we've talked about is the interoperability between 3.1 and 3.0. And from what I understand, the interoperability, and I think this was mentioned earlier, could include actually using the two technologies together, bonding 3.0 channels with 3.1 and whatnot. George, is that something you folks are looking at doing?
Yeah, it works today. I can tell you it works today. We do 25 channel bonding, meaning 24 single carrier QAMs and 1 OFDM block. We do that today.
That was demonstrated in the demos at CableLabs a few weeks ago.
And if you walk through the floor, you'll see that just about everybody that has a modem will show you that. Modem and CMTS will show you that.
So Ron, in terms of the conversations you're having with your customers, does that seem like it's likely to be a popular use case early on, or is that something people will be looking at down the road?
I think it's definitely going to be a popular use case. It gives cable operators the ability to leverage the existing DOCSIS 3.0 technology along with DOCSIS 3.1 technology. So the embedded base of 3.0 modems will work just fine with the what we'll call the legacy single carrier QAM DOCSIS 3.0 signals. But when the DOCSIS 3.1 signals and technology are deployed, the people in the subscriber base who have the 3.1 modems can get even greater throughput than just the standalone 3.0 channels or the standalone OFDM channel or channels, because the data can be bonded across all of those together. So the data pipe now for the 3.1 customer includes the single carrier QAM signals that historically have carried just 3.0 traffic, plus the OFDM signal. So it significantly increases the pipe without having to throw away the legacy equipment. And that was one of the key features that was important in including in the spec, was that ability to bond across 3.0 and 3.1 signals.
Yeah, let me highlight one point about this. So it's crucial that we can do that so that we don't have to replicate capacity in 3.0 and 3.1 channels. So you have, say, 16 or 24 or 8 DOCSIS downstreams, and you want to expand and support, say an additional gigabit per second capacity. You can use the spectrum that you have available today and the capacity that you have available today and bond it with 3.1 channels so that you don't have to replicate spectrum or use additional spectrum to replicate capacities already available. So it's the sum of all of the capacity that is the benefit of being able to bond across single carrier QAM, DOCSIS 3.0 channels, and OFDM channels.
And
so it's very crucial from an operator perspective.
And just to clarify on that, the 3.1 modems can take advantage of bonding across the two technologies. Obviously, the older 3.0 modems won't be able to take advantage of the OFDM signals, but the 3.1 modems certainly will.
Well, the good thing about when you have both 3.1 and 3.0 channels, as you start having 3.1 modems in the field, and you start doing the load balancing between 3.0 and 3.1 channels, even 3.0 modems or customers will benefit. Because as you start shifting the traffic from the 3.0 channels to 3.1, you are freeing up more capacity on the 3.0 channels for legacy customers as well. So at the end, as long as you start deploying both, everybody benefits. So the benefit is not only limited to folks who are using a 3.1 modem.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, and this makes, I mean, from my standpoint, having worked on CMTSs, this makes, if you have a large population of DOCSIS 3.0 modems and you're starting to migrate to 3.1, this makes load balancing so much simpler when you're not trying to keep things separated. But the other aspect, which I recently became aware of, is this also works the same way in the upstream. That DOCSIS 3.0 modems can be bonded with DOCSIS 3.1 modems, where the DOCSIS 3.1 modems can be operating in OFDM mode in the upstream in part of their spectrum, and then operating in a DOCSIS 3.0 mode in the lower part of their spectrum, where again you have a large population of DOCSIS 3.0 mode. So this really makes it again simpler in the upstream to manage a large population of DOCSIS 3.0 modems, where you have a small population of 3.1 modems, and they're operating in coexistence with each other very, very simply. And so I think this really makes it simple to do your migration, many DOCSIS 3.0 modems, and you start to add 3.1 modems, and the 3.1 modems are operating in 3.0 mode in the same spectrum that the 3.0 modems are, which for especially technicians that are going to be looking at spectrum, doing troubleshooting, it makes them so much easier because they're seeing what they expect to see in the frequency range where 3.0 modems are typically operating. And OFDMA mode, where where they expect that frequency range to be operating in also.
Very good. So let's see, we have about 15 minutes left in our program, and I want to make sure that you in the audience have the opportunity to ask questions. If you have a question, please get up and come to the microphone. And in addition, hopefully we have the opportunity to field some questions from our live streaming audience as well. While you're thinking of questions, let me ask another one. So certainly in stories you read and conversations we hear, DOCSIS 3.1 is kind of pitted as the alternative to fiber to the home. Is that indeed the case? Is it an either or? Is it potentially complementary? Maybe, George, since you have fiber to the home technology in your networks as well, how do you see using that?
We've been deploying fiber to the premise technology both for business and commercial service, both for business and residential services for quite some time. And I don't think that one is an alternative to the other. It's all about services, I think, and we offer gigabit per second service. We can offer it over DOCSIS with DOCSIS 3.1. We can offer it over fiber with PON type services. We can offer them in different ways in different places, whichever one is most appropriate. In some places, wherever we do new build, we build fiber to the premise. Wherever we have, which is in relative terms a smaller percentage of the footprint, because there's relatively fewer homes being built than the homes that you already have. So I don't think one is an alternative to the other. I think we're expanding on the use of both. We're going to deploy 3.1 across the entire footprint, relatively quickly. In a couple of years, we'll have it across the entire footprint, so we'll be able to offer gigabit per second services across the entire footprint with DOCSIS 3.1, but we can also do the same thing with fiber to the premise. We are not tied to one or the other, and we have the advantage of being able to offer the same kinds of services, digital video, high-speed data, voice. We can offer them across HFC networks, and we can offer them across fiber to the home networks. We don't have to build one or the other. We're not tied to one or the other. We can offer both of them. So it's complementary. I think they're complementary technologies that we'll use extensively across the footprint.
I think one of the neat things about 3.1 is that it allows the industry to leverage its existing HFC networks to have the performance of fiber to the home, and it gives operators another tool in the toolbox. So you use the appropriate tool for the appropriate part of the market. I think most of us know that trying to do what's called brownfield deployment of fiber to the home is still fairly expensive. And why go out and rip out the HFC network if we want to do higher data rates to and from our customers? Well, DOCSIS 3.1 lets us do that on our existing HFC networks. In the greenfield or new build applications, certainly fiber to the home makes sense. So it's as George says, it's not an either or an or. It's another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, in the end, the service reaches the customer in ways other than through HFC or fiber to the premise. In the end, you have a TV with an HDMI connector, you have a PC with a Wi-Fi interface. Very few people nowadays use the wired Ethernet cable, but that is still another way of getting service. And in the end, it's not the coax cable that talks to the, if you will, that connects the PC, or it's not the the fiber cable that connects to the TV. These things don't exist, right? So in the end, how we transport the services to the home is immaterial to the customer. It doesn't really matter as long as you can get to the customer with a full array of video services with a high-speed data service. It's all the same. It doesn't matter to the customer. And the fact that we have both HFC techniques to deploy these services over HFC, including gigabit per second service and through fiber, is what makes our industry so much more, I think, powerful than others. I think we're in a great position to offer all these services for many, many years to come.
Again, do we have any questions from the audience? Oh, come on.
I think we put them all to sleep.
Wait, here's one here. Could you get up and...
I have a couple of questions. One is a simple one. Why is we called it 3.1? It's so different from 3.0. Why not 4.0? Who came up with the 3.1?
Why not?
And the second question is that there's two phases going to 1.2 gig downstream and 1.8. Can you guys explain the challenges and why two phases? And when you actually go deploy this in a home, you have to go change your splitters in the attic, or how do you actually think about deploying that on the downstream frequency if you want to use the whole bandwidth?
I'll touch a little bit on the second question first, and maybe defer to Bilal on the numbering scheme that CableLabs chose. DOCSIS 3.1, as most of you know, supports expanded bandwidth operation. The mandatory frequency range is 258 megahertz to 1218 megahertz, or roughly 1.2 gigahertz. Does that mean you have to expand your network to be able to deploy DOCSIS 3.1? No, you don't need a 1.2 gigahertz network to operate with 3.1. You can deploy it in a 550 plant or a 750 plant or an 870 plant. That's easy to do, so you don't have to make those changes to deploy it. The optional downstream bandwidths start at 108 megahertz on the bottom end and go as high as almost at 1.8 gigahertz. It's 1794 megahertz. Do you have to go to 1.8 gigahertz to deploy DOCSIS 3.1? No. Now, if in the future you choose to take advantage of the scalability of DOCSIS 3.1, which supports upwards of 10 gigabits plus per second in the downstream direction, well, yeah, then you'd need to expand the bandwidth of the network. But that's a decision that individual cable operators will have to make. And is, how much of that capability is really desired. And it's not simply a matter of going out and, all right, let's replace the taps and we'll replace the splitters and replace the amplifiers and the nodes with 1.2 or 1.8 gigahertz capable devices. But there are some other things that have to be considered when doing that. For example, coexistence with MoCA inside the home. As most of you know, MoCA operates on frequencies that overlap some of that expanded downstream frequency range. So you'd have to take into consideration how do you deploy the higher frequency ranges in your HFC network and let it still live with MoCA inside the home. And there are ways to do that. In fact, SCTE has a special working group of which I'm a member, along with Lamar and I think some others in the room, who are coming up with an operational practice and guidelines and recommendations that include isolation requirements, both frequency and amplitude-wise, for MoCA and DOCSIS 3.1 coexistence. So there are a lot of things that have to come into play. But I want to emphasize that 3.1 is deployable on today's networks. You don't have to increase the bandwidth of your network, upstream or downstream, to deploy 3.1 today. You don't have to do that. That's a choice you have to make. Do you need that additional capacity? If you can do it, if you can provide a gigabit per second service on today's networks, you may be fine with that and say we don't need to go above a gigahertz. But that's an operator choice. Now on the counting, Bilal, I'll leave that to you.
So if you look at the 3.1, yes, we did change the physical layer significantly from 3.0, but we did inherit a lot of the functionality from 3.0 as well. If you look at the MAC layer, the concept of channel bonding, the MAC layer protocols, a lot of them are inherited from 3.0. And then having the added benefit of it being backward compatible and also being able to bond across both and deployed on the same network as a 3.0 network, it makes it logical to go from a 3.0 to a 3.1, because basically you're not changing everything. It's a gradual increase rather than a forklift change for the whole network.
Yeah, we've never been as an industry great on naming things. DOCSIS, But I vote for 4.ever.
I was going to say 42, but
Yeah.
6x9.
some of you will get the
Yeah.
reference to 42.
I want to underscore a point that Ron made. You don't have to upgrade the plant in order to deploy DOCSIS 3.1. That is, we get asked that all the time, right? In fact, I see so much commentary and writing about, what the enhancements that you have to make in the plant to support DOCSIS 3.1. And the fact of the matter is you don't have to upgrade anything. Not that you don't want to upgrade anything. As over the years, over the decades that the cable industry has existed, we've gone through from 3-channel systems all the way to 1.2 gigahertz systems now if you buy the newer gear. You don't have to change the plant in any way. But if you do, then the benefits DOCSIS 3.1 brings are far more than we've ever had before. There's more tools in the toolbox than ever before.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Ron brought up. He brought up our operational practices led by David Fellows. We're working on a ton of content at SCTE. So really everybody in this room, you can go back and start with webinars. We have over 9 webinars on DOCSIS 3.1. We have webinars that are going out through our international brand, the Internet Society of Broadband experts, already talking about D31 and what you need to do to get prepared. You'll see the wired line RF track here at Expo, talking about IP video, network function virtualization, and upstream capabilities. So we even have a DOCSIS engineering professional certification, so you can get certified in DOCSIS and understand the PHY and the MAC layer and all the changes. And we're going to put out the DOCSIS 3.1 boot camp certification and course as well. That's going to come out in December. It's a whole new thinking. So just like DOCSIS 3.1 has major changes, our training, consider it 2.0. Brand new architecture in the training, all high interactivity, video content. So it's a course that's really designed to follow pace with DOCSIS and to get you prepared faster than ever in DOCSIS. So there's a lot of work at the SCTE on this side too.
And will there be a 2.1 just to keep up with the 3?
Yeah, yeah, in January 2.1.
Yeah, there we go.
See what I mean about naming?
Exactly.
I still like 42.
Yeah.
Yes, so does Douglas Adams. Any additional questions from the audience? All right, a couple of quick questions from
Can
me.
we ask somebody something to the audience?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So how many of you are operators? If you can raise your hand, how many of you are? Good, good. If you can keep your hands out, how many of you are planning on deploying DOCSIS 3.1? If you can lower your hand, if you're planning on deploying DOCSIS, if you can keep your hand up, if you're planning on deploying DOCSIS 3.1 in 2016. So many more than, many more than before. Did the show change your mind? Did things that you see in the show change your mind? No?
We're getting a lot of quizzical looks, for those of you who can't see it on the camera.
Well, how about folks in 2017, or are you thinking about deploying DOCSIS 3.1? Okay. So
Yeah. Who's not planning on deploying DOCSIS 3.1 by 2017? Nobody.
Nobody, so
By
So-
2017, we'll see DOCSIS 3.1 everywhere.
there we go.
yeah.
So a specific question for you, George. While I have you here, it's something I've been curious about. Of course, as we mentioned, you have fiber to the home services as well, including a 2 gigabit service. In the press releases announcing the 2 gig, there was discussion about prepping DOCSIS 3.1 for gigabit services. Once you have 3.1, will you be offering the same 2 gig service using that technology as well, or will 2 gig strictly be a fiber to the home service?
No, there'll be both. There are folks that want, for one reason or another, fiber-based services. In some areas, we have only fiber-based services. In some areas, we have only HFC-based services. We can do actually fiber-based services everywhere. So no, I think we'll continue having both. And this gigamania going on, I think is going to make us, expand from that. So I think we'll continue having both.
Very good. All right, so I think we have time for one more omnibus question, and maybe we'll start with you, Brad, and we'll walk this way. If next year we have DOCSIS revisited, what are we likely going to be talking about, Brad?
I think we'll be talking about it's going to be beyond field trials at that point. We'll be talking about what kind of speeds we're seeing, what kind of speed tiers we're offering, what the take rate, the number of deployed CMTS, DOCSIS 3.1 CMTSs are, and then the thing I'll be really excited and passionate about is how we're seeing the rollout of software from a P&M standpoint, what kind of technologies we have out there, where we are from a development standpoint, and the kind of successes that we're having with P&M in the DOCSIS 3.1 world. So that I'll be really excited to report on.
George?
I think we'll be definitely talking about deployments. I think we'll be talking about experiences with deployments. I think we'll be talking about the home network. We're at a crossroads on the home network where we're delivering more capacity to the home than the home network can support, which we've never had before. And so we'll be talking a lot about that. We'll certainly be talking about Wi-Fi and how do we make Wi-Fi more useful and more pervasive than ever before. And I think we'll be talking about tools to make the service better. I think we'll be talking about improvements to plans and how we can take advantage of them and to the services that go along with it. So we're definitely going to be, we won't be talking about when the equipment is ready for certification.
Because that's coming soon.
That is coming soon, exactly.
That's right.
Ron?
I think next year we'll be talking about configuration questions. As cable operators deploy DOCSIS 3.1, there will be a lot of questions about how do we optimize this for our network and which knobs do we tweak in DOCSIS 3.1, because as I mentioned earlier, DOCSIS 3.1 has a lot of knobs in it to tweak to really optimize the configuration. So we'll probably be discussing configuration questions.
Steve?
Yeah, I definitely agree with optimizing, and further is a playbook of sorts on troubleshooting, really understanding how to support DOCSIS. We'll see better tools out there. We'll be able to evaluate more tools, what's working, what's not working. How do we properly measure it in the home? How do we measure it at the head end? So there'll be a lot of work around the tools. that we can talk about next year.
Bilal?
Well, I think for next year, the focus will be best practices, whether in the home or on the access network, and also looking a bit ahead, how does the distributed CCAP play into the DOCSIS 3.1, and what does it also add to us on our network?
Very good.
Actually, one more thing. I
Sure.
think we'll be talking about DOCSIS 3.1 in the upstream. You know, like we did with DOCSIS 3.0, we're deploying, you know, with DOCSIS 3.0, we deployed downstream channel bonding, and then even 2 years later, we started deploying upstream channel bonding. Next year, at this time, we'll be talking about DOCSIS 3.1 in the upstream.
And I think we'll be talking about channels that are larger than 24 megahertz, so starting to look at that, how do we expand out to 192?
Very good. Well, with that, I'd like to thank our panel of experts for their expertise, you folks in the audience for attending. Please join me in applauding our experts. I'd like to thank again our sponsors, Trilithic, VX, and Viavi, as well as our live stream sponsor, Eris. For those of you online, thank you for joining us as well. For those of you here in the live audience, enjoy the rest of the show, and thank you for coming. Thank you.
Everybody's eager.